Okay, we should all be on this page in our packet here. Today we're going to still use those congruence tests, but we're going to now start getting into the proofs. Like, how do we start to use those congruence tests in order to prove that two triangles in our picture are congruent to each other? So before we even get too far into this, can you guys remind me, what are the 5 congruence tests that we talked about last week? Just say one if you know one. SSS.
AAS.
SAS. 2 more. And there's one more. ASA. Thank you. Okay. So those are the 5 that we talked about last week. That means today when we start to try to prove that triangles are congruent, we're trying to get to one of those 5 tests. So in the given information, they'll maybe give you some sides, maybe some angles. We should be able to mark those things up in our picture if they're not already marked up. But then we're going to want to look for other things like we looked last week in order to use one of those tests. On Friday, when we went over this, we had problems where we had to look for like vertical angles or like a shared side. You're still going to be looking for some of those things today in order to use one of those 5 tests. Okay. And so that's what I want to kind of just remind you guys of next year. So if you guys go kind of right underneath that, there's all those like bullet points. You know, they say reflexive property, vertical angles, midpoint. Those are the things I want to talk about right now because those are the things that you're going to want to be looking for as you get into your proofs to try to add more stuff to your picture. Because they will give us some information in our given, but they're not going to give us everything. And so we need to be able to add stuff to it in order to get to one of these tests. So let's talk about reflexive property. Reflexive property can apply to an angle or to a side. Let's just think back when you guys learned about the reflexive property, we gave you the example of like when you look in the mirror. When you look in the mirror, who do you see? Yourself. Okay, so think about your reflection. Anytime something is shared between the 2 triangles, like it overlaps, like a side is shared. You know, last week I gave you that example of like if you had a sandwich kind of cut in the triangles, that side in the middle is shared between the 2. Or it could apply to an angle. So if there's an angle that overlaps, like you have 2 triangles kind of like mesh on top of each other and one angle is shared, that could be using the reflexive property. So it could be saying something like angle A is congruent to angle A, or side AB is congruent to side AB. That's what the reflexive property is going to look like. You're just able to state that they're equal to itself, essentially, because it shares. Vertical angles, we saw that last week too. A lot of times when we saw like that, I called it the bow tie shape. So if you have triangles that kind of look like this, there's going to be vertical angles there and there, kind of in the corners. So if we see that happening, we probably are going to need to use vertical angles as a way to state that those angles in the middle there that overlap are congruent to each other. Okay, both of those are things that we kind of talked about last week of adding the markings to our picture, but we weren't really proving yet, so we weren't justifying why. Today, we're going to just add that next piece of justification. Now, these next couple of things, like these 3, I would say these are going to show up in your given usually. So what I mean is like they may not always tell you in the given like, hey, you have vertical angles, or hey, there's a reflexive side showing up. because we should be able to see that from our picture. These next three things, though, they're going to maybe have those words like midpoint, bisector in the given for you to use. Midpoint is saying that two segments, like two halves of a segment, are congruent to each other. So I'm just going to underline two halves of a segment are congruent. Midpoint is usually only on segments. We don't really ever see midpoint in angles, where you have a big long segment and there's a point that's placed right in the middle, and that's saying that, like, hey, the left-hand side of that segment is equal to the right-hand side of that segment then too. That's using the midpoint property. Now, bisector kind of works the same way as a midpoint does because it cuts something in half, but it could be on an angle or on a segment. And so I'm just going to write it cuts in half. It cuts a segment in half, or it cuts an angle in half. At the beginning of the year, when we were doing constructions, you guys constructed a bisector of both segments and angles, so you've seen these before. And when we were bisecting something, that's when we added those markings onto our picture. We had like the dashes through our segment, or we put those little arcs inside of our angle in order to show that they were equal. And then the last one is the alternate interiors angles. We know what those look like because we talked about those a lot in the last unit, but these are going to show up when there's parallel sides in your given. So if they talk about lines being parallel in your given information, you're probably going to be looking for alternate interior angles. So some of these things are going to show up a lot today in our proofs. These are the things that we just want to be looking for to try to figure out what more can I add to my picture in order to get to one of those 5 tests. All right, so I want to get in now to the first one down here below. Number 1. Okay, and these are going to start out the same way as they did when we did them in the last chapter. We always start with what? Given. So let's write down, everybody, write down all of your given information. If you need to, you can draw a line underneath that like I did if you need to like have some separation, if you kind of, especially if you're numbering your steps and you want to keep them together, draw those lines to kind of separate your steps. But we've got some given information that we just wrote down there. Now look at your picture up above, guys. Is anything marked on those 2 triangles? Nothing is marked right now. We need to maybe add the markings to it. So in that given information, I now want to go to my picture and I want to mark up what I can. I would always encourage you guys, mark up your picture. Anytime that you're given a problem like this, if you're not marking up your picture, it's going to be harder to see the test that you're trying to use. So I would definitely make sure you're marking up sides and angles if you can. So up here, let's start with those 2 angles. Where in the picture is angle BDT? Can you guys describe to me where it is? Jackson. The lower, like kind of the bottom right corner maybe? Yeah. So right here, kind of where D is, it's like the bottom half is what he's saying. And so you can mark that a couple ways. I'm going to put an arc in there. You guys can put an arc, or last week, you saw like they would put like a little star or like a dot or something. You can use those symbols also if you don't want to draw an arc. So that's BDT. Where's GTD? Where's that one at? Do you guys see it, Keegan?
The upper left corner.
Upper left corner. So that also needs to get an arc. You have to mark those the same because we're told that they're congruent. Okay? What else in the given should we mark? Okay, so we're talking about sides now. Yeah? How do we mark up sides? Dashes. So I don't care how many dashes you put through the sides. You can decide. You want to put 1, 2, 3, whatever. So BD is like the bottom. I'm going to put 1 dash through that. And then GT is the top. We're going to put 1 dash through that. Okay, if we look at what we just did there, we have a side marked and we have a angle marked for both of the triangles. Do you guys see the 2 triangles in the picture we're trying to show are congruent to each other? Nod your heads if you see them. Okay, so we want to get to there. Now look at your proof statement down below. Do you see what it says? What's that telling us? Yeah, they're already giving you the triangles in the congruent statement there. Okay, so we might also need to just use that, especially as we're trying to put things together or be able to name things correctly. They are going to give you probably that congruent statement. Once we get to our 3 pieces of marked information, we should be able to finish our proof here and show that those are congruent. Okay, so we're trying to work towards that. I need another piece of information marked though, because I have 2, but to use any of my congruence tests, I need 3 pieces. Do you guys see something that we could mark? Logan? The line in the middle between, like T to D you're talking about. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give that 2 dashes. And let's write this down. TD is congruent to, you're saying itself, so TD. Because of what property? What bullet point up above did we talk about says things are equal to itself? Reflexive. So because that side is shared, it's like reflected between the 2 triangles. That's why we're saying reflexive there. Okay. Do I have 3 pieces marked now? Do they make a pattern that we can use? What pattern are we using? SAS. Okay, again, think back to what we talked about on Friday, guys. Make sure that you look at the part of the triangle that like doesn't have any markings at all. So like side TB and even angle B have nothing marked. Angle T is not marked at all. So you want to start on like either side of that. So if all of this is not marked, you want to start either at this side or you want to start at this side because these are the 2 closest pieces to the unmarked part of your triangle. And then you work towards the marking. So if I start here, I would go side towards the angle, towards the side, or if you go reverse, it's the same thing. So I agree. You should be able to use side, angle, side. And like I said, the proof statement already has the congruent statement written out for you. So really, you guys just have to copy that down. So triangle BTD is congruent to triangle GDT because of side, angle, side. Okay, there's our first triangle proof. What do you guys think about that? Was it okay? Most of these triangle proofs, guys, are going to be 4 to 3 steps, maybe 5, like every once in a while. But most of the time, they're not going to be much more than that. And as you guys get going, you're probably going to be using things like the reflexive property, vertical angles, all those bullet points we talked about, you're going to see them show up over and over and over again. It's not like I'm going to all of a sudden throw a huge curveball at you. It's something that we've never talked about before is going to happen inside of these proofs. You're going to start to recognize, hopefully, there's a lot of the same patterns that show up inside of these triangle proofs. All right, so let's come on over here to number 2. Let's take a look at another one. Again, let's all start by copying the given down. Okay, remember the given is free points. You should be able to write that down no matter what. Again, the picture is not marked up at all, so let's go ahead and mark up what we can. I know that angles B and D are congruent, so I'm just going to give an arc to each one of those. Again, you don't have to use arcs. You could draw whatever you want into those angles for symbols. Then it also talks about C is the midpoint of AE. Okay, we went over midpoint up above in those bullet points. What did we say midpoint does? Yeah, so it says up there, we use this to say that 2 halves of a segment would be congruent. So let's figure out what two halves of the segment would be congruent here. If C is in the middle of that segment A to E, like the bottom corner up to the top corner, C is right in the middle, what parts would be equal? Where should I draw dashes at? AC and CE. If C is in the middle here, guys, of this segment, that means that this half and this half should be equal to each other or congruent. So those are the ones that we want to make markings on. So I'm just going to give each of those a dash. Okay, and the reason why we're doing this is because it's the definition of midpoint. We're just using what we know that word means to make those marks. But let's talk about how to name them. We want to really be careful here that we're keeping like things together. Remember when we were filling out congruent statements on Friday, I said you have to keep the like angles, like the like letters together in your picture. Keegan, what do you think?
Would it be AC is congruent to DC?
It is. Can you explain how you maybe got there? Like, how'd you know to put A and E in the same position?
Because C is going to stay in the same spot because they're ending at that in the middle, and then you just put them in first.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way to think about that. He said C's in the middle. It's shared between those two triangles. So you know C needs to stay in the same spot. Like it's going to be equal to itself, basically. And so A and E are just going to have to match up together. The other thing you could do is if you guys look down below at your the prove statement, do you guys see how both like C is in the middle of the two triangle names? And then like A and E are both last? That'd be another thing that you guys could look at to figure out the order of letters. That prove statement is going to tell you what needs to match up. So just something else that you guys could be looking at to like see if you need help with like figuring out what letters go with what. Okay. We've got two things marked. I need a third thing. What else is showing up in these pictures here? Logan? Where's vertical? So are you talking about like here at C?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mark this I'm going to give it 2 arcs and give this one 2 arcs. Okay, and then down here I'm going to write for step 3, these are vertical. Okay, and let's go over how to name these. I want to see what you guys remember from at the beginning of the school year. Could I just say angle C? How many angle C's are in the picture? Ooh, I heard 1, I heard 2. Are there more than 2? 4? Do you guys see 4 angle C's in the picture? Do you see 2? If I said angle C, I could be talking about any of these angles right here in the middle. Because don't they all have C as a vertex? So we can't just say angle C because you wouldn't know what angle C's I'm talking about because there's 4 to choose from. Now I'm talking about these two specifically. I got to name them a little bit better. I can't just say angle C. So we're going to have to use 3 letters to name them. Anyone want to give me what they think? How could we name those 2 vertical angles? ACB is congruent to what? Good. Everyone agree with Macy there? A and E have to go together. C is in the middle. B and D have to go together. So I think she got it written down perfectly there. Okay, do we have enough now to prove that these triangles are congruent? Do we have one of our 5 tests? If so, which one? What'd you say? Side angle side? I only have one side marked though. Side angle angle or angle angle side is maybe another way that we've talked about that one. Okay, either one works. Like if you write it side angle angle, I'm not going to be too nitpicky about that because it is the same test. It's just written backwards. And then all you need to do is take that prove statement and write it down. Triangle BCA is congruent to triangle DCE. All right, questions on number 2 there? Okay, what I would like you guys to do is number 3. Give that one a try by yourself here. I'll give you a couple minutes to work on it. Okay, what did we guys put down for step 1? Given. Where'd you guys go next after you marked up your picture? What'd you do next? Keegan?
I said that the middle one was reflexive.
Okay. So like AC is congruent to AC?
Yeah.
Because of reflexive. I agree. It's shared. Anytime you guys see a shared side, you're probably going to be using reflexive. Do we need to add anything else, or do we have enough to say that these triangles are congruent? Do we need more, or are we good? We're good, because what test can we use? SSS. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ADC because of side, side, side. Very good. Questions on that one? I hope you guys recognize this one was very close to number one. I mean, the given differs slightly because they gave you an angle instead of two sides, but you still use the reflexive. And then that just changed our congruence test a little bit. But like I said, I'm hoping as you guys do more of these, you'll start to recognize a lot of these patterns are the same. You're going to use some of the same properties over and over and over again. So anytime you see a shared side, you should just automatically think reflexive. Anytime we see like that bow tie shape up there on number 2, you should think vertical angles are going to show up. So hopefully you can start to kind of recognize some of those things.